The wheat had grown tall enough to hide a man, but not tall enough to hide an aircraft. Feldwebel Otto Brandt saw it first, the elliptical wing cutting through the golden stalks like a shark's fin breaking water. He raised his fist and his patrol stopped. For a long moment, no one breathed. They had found a Spitfire. The date was June 23, 1940. France had fallen 5 days earlier. The British Expeditionary Force had fled across the Channel from Dunkirk, leaving behind tanks, trucks, artillery, and the bodies of their dead. But they had not left behind many aircraft. The Royal Air Force had fought savagely to protect the evacuation, and what planes they lost usually burned or crashed into the sea. An intact Spitfire was worth more than gold. Brandt approached slowly, rifle raised. The cockpit canopy was open. Dark stains marked the fuselage near the engine cowling, oil, not blood. The propeller blades were bent from a hard landing, but the airframe looked whole. Beside the aircraft, crushed wheat showed where someone had walked toward the nearby tree line. Brandt found the parachute there, bundled and hidden beneath branches. The pilot had survived. He had tried to run. They caught Flight Lieutenant David Ashworth 3 kilometers away, hiding in a barn. He had burns on his hands from trying to set fire to his aircraft, but the flames had not taken hold. The Merlin engine had seized during the chaos over Dunkirk, a oil line failure, he would later tell his interrogators. He had glided down with a dead engine, certain he would die, and instead he had delivered the most advanced fighter in the world directly into enemy hands. Within hours, the Spitfire was covered with tarps. Within days, it was crated and loaded onto a train heading east into Germany. The destination was Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's most secret testing facility, hidden in the forests of Mecklenburg. There, Germany's finest engineers and test pilots studied captured enemy aircraft, searching for weaknesses to exploit and secrets to steal. Hauptmann Werner Kessler received the assignment on a humid July morning. He was 34 years old, a veteran of the Condor Legion in Spain, and one of the most experienced test pilots in the Reich. He had flown everything from gliders to the newest Messerschmitt prototypes. He had written technical manuals that were still used in Luftwaffe training schools. And he had never lost the habit of telling the truth, even when the truth was unwelcome. His commanding officer, Oberstleutnant Friedrich Holder, handed him the file with obvious satisfaction. Holder was a party man, more politician than pilot, and he saw the captured Spitfire as an opportunity for propaganda. German engineers would expose British weakness. German superiority would be proven scientifically. Find what makes it fail, Holder said. Find its limits. Our pilots need to know how to kill these things. Kessler took the file and said nothing. He had heard the stories from the Channel front, stories of Spitfires that could turn inside a Bf-109, that could climb faster than anything the Luftwaffe had. Stories of experienced German pilots who never came home. He did not believe in propaganda. He believed in data. The Spitfire arrived at Rechlin in pieces. For 2 weeks, Kessler supervised its reconstruction. He studied the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, noting its carburetor system, inferior to German fuel injection in -G maneuvers, but simpler and more reliable. He measured the wing surfaces, calculating lift coefficients. He ran his hands along the thin aluminum skin, so much lighter than German construction methods. His engineers were dismissive. The British built their aircraft like they built their ships, they joked, with arrogance and tradition instead of science. The Spitfire was elegant, they admitted, but elegance did not win wars. Kessler was not so certain that at night, he walked through the hangar alone. The Spitfire sat under work lights, its elliptical wings casting strange shadows on the concrete floor. Reginald Mitchell had designed those wings. Kessler had read the intelligence reports. Mitchell had been dying of cancer when he created the Spitfire, racing against his own death to give Britain a fighter that might save it. He had succeeded, and then he had died, never knowing if his creation would matter. Standing in the darkness, Kessler felt something he had not felt in years. Uncertainty. Respect. Perhaps even fear. Tomorrow he would fly it. Tomorrow he would learn what the British had built. And tomorrow, he suspected, everything he believed about this war would change. He touched the fuselage one last time. The metal was cold beneath his fingers. Somewhere across the channel, young men were climbing into cockpits just like this one, preparing to fight and die. His brother Klaus was stationed at Calais, waiting for the invasion of England. He would face Spitfires soon. Kessler needed to know the truth. Not for propaganda. Not for Halder. For Klaus. For all of them, the hangar lights hummed. The Spitfire waited. And the war was only beginning. The Merlin engine coughed twice, then caught with a sound like rolling thunder. Werner Kessler felt the vibration travel through his seat, up his spine, into his skull. The instrument panel trembled. The propeller became a silver blur. And for the first time in his career, he did not know what would happen next. He had flown over 40 different aircraft types. He had survived engine fires, structural failures, and a mid-air collision that had cost him 3 months in a hospital bed. He understood machines the way some men understood women, their moods, their limits, their hidden desires. But this machine was foreign. This machine was the enemy. He released the brakes. The Spitfire leaped forward with startling eagerness. The tail came up almost immediately, far faster than in a Bf-109. Within seconds, Kessler was airborne, the forests of Mecklenburg falling away beneath him. He banked gently, testing the controls, and felt his breath catch. The aircraft responded to his thoughts. Not to his hands, to his thoughts. The control stick moved with the lightest pressure. The rudder pedals were perfectly balanced. Every input produced exactly the response he expected, with none of the lag or resistance he was accustomed to in German fighters. It was as if the Spitfire had been built specifically for him. He climbed. The altimeter wound upward, 3,000 meters, 4,000, 5,000. The rate of climb was extraordinary. A Bf-109E could reach 5,000 meters in about 6 minutes under ideal conditions. The Spitfire did it in under 5. At high altitude, the supercharged Merlin sang with power. Kessler rolled the aircraft inverted and felt gravity pull him against his harness. He pulled through into a dive, watching the airspeed indicator climb toward the red line. The controls grew heavier but remained responsive. He pulled out at 2,000 meters, grunting against the G-forces, and immediately snap-rolled left. The Spitfire turned inside a radius that would have been impossible for any German fighter. The elliptical wings, those beautiful, strange wings that his engineers had mocked, generated lift with remarkable efficiency. In a turning fight, a Spitfire pilot could pull angles that would stall a Messerschmitt. For 20 minutes, Kessler pushed the captured fighter to its limits. He performed every test maneuver in the manual, plus several he invented on the spot. When he finally landed, taxiing back to the hangar where his ground crew waited, his hands were shaking and his flight suit was soaked with sweat. Oberstleutnant Halder was waiting with a smile. "Well? What did you find? What are its weaknesses?" Kessler climbed out of the cockpit slowly. He pulled off his leather helmet and ran his fingers through his damp hair. The summer sun was warm on his face. Around him, mechanics and engineers watched with eager eyes, waiting for confirmation of what they already believed, that German engineering was superior, that the enemy was weak, that victory was certain. He could not give them that confirmation. "The carburetor," he said carefully. "Under negative G-forces, the engine will cut out briefly. Our fuel-injected engines do not have this problem. In a diving attack, we have an advantage." Halder nodded eagerly. "What else?" "At very high speeds, the ailerons stiffen. Above 600 km per hour, roll rate decreases significantly. A Bf-109 can roll faster in a high-speed dive." "Excellent. What else?" Kessler hesitated. These were real weaknesses, documented by his instruments and confirmed by his experience. But they were small weaknesses. Tactical details that mattered only in specific situations. They did not change the fundamental truth. "The aircraft is superior in sustained turning combat," he said quietly. "Its climb rate exceeds ours below 5,000 meters. Its controls are more responsive at all speeds. In a dogfight between pilots of equal skill, the Spitfire will win. The silence was absolute. Halder's smile vanished. The mechanics looked at each other uncertainly. Somewhere in the distance, an aircraft engine whined as another test flight began. "That is not possible," Halder said. "I have the data. The film from the gun cameras. The instrument recordings. I can show you." "I said that is not possible." Halder's voice had gone cold. "You will review your findings. You will reconsider your conclusions. And you will submit a report that reflects the reality of German air superiority." That night, Kessler sat alone in his quarters with a bottle of schnapps and a photograph of Klaus. His younger brother was 26 years old, a fighter pilot with JG-26, stationed on the Channel coast. He had 12 victories already. He was brave, skilled, and absolutely certain that Germany would win the war. He had never flown against a Spitfire. Kessler drank until the bottle was empty. Then he began writing his report, the honest one, the one that told the truth. He did not know if anyone would read it. He did not know if it would save a single life. But he knew that lies killed pilots just as surely as bullets, and he would not be responsible for his brother's death. The pen scratched across paper. Outside, the stars turned slowly over Germany. And across the Channel, the Spitfires waited. The telegram arrived on September 15, 1940, the day that would later be called the climax of the Battle of Britain. It was addressed to Hauptmann Werner Kessler, and it contained 7 words that stopped his heart: Klaus missing. Aircraft lost over Kent. Investigating, Kessler read the telegram 3 times. Then he folded it carefully, placed it in his breast pocket, and walked to the hangar where the captured Spitfire sat under armed guard. He did not cry. He did not scream. He simply stood there in the darkness, staring at the aircraft that might have killed his brother, and felt something inside him turn to ice. The Battle of Britain had been raging for 2 months. Every day, waves of German bombers crossed the Channel, escorted by Bf-109s and Bf-110s. Every day, they were met by hurricanes and Spitfires rising from airfields across southern England. The losses on both sides were staggering. Germany was losing bombers faster than factories could build them. Fighter pilots were dying faster than training schools could replace them, and the truth that Kessler had discovered, the truth that Halder had buried, was costing lives every single day. His report had been classified and filed away. The official assessment stated that the Spitfire was inferior to German fighters in every meaningful way. Propaganda films showed confident Luftwaffe pilots dismissing British aircraft as outdated and weak. Meanwhile, the kill ratios told a different story. In turning engagements, German pilots died. In prolonged dogfights, German pilots died. Only in diving attacks from altitude did the Bf-109 hold a clear advantage. Kessler had tried to follow orders. He had tried to believe that his superiors knew best. But the telegrams kept coming, friends from flight school, men he had trained with, men he had laughed with over beers in Spanish cantinas during the Civil War. Shot down. Missing. Dead. And now Klaus. That he made his decision in the darkness of that hangar. Over the following weeks, Kessler reached out to old contacts in frontline fighter units. He wrote letters that could not be traced. He made telephone calls from public booths in nearby towns. He passed along everything he had learned, the Spitfire's weaknesses and strengths, the tactics that worked and the tactics that killed. Never engage in a turning fight. Use altitude and speed. Attack from the sun. Fire and break away. Do not chase them. Do not let them chase you. The information spread through the pilot network like water through sand. It contradicted official doctrine, but frontline pilots trusted other pilots more than they trusted headquarters. Slowly, German tactics began to shift. Squadron leaders who had lost half their men started drilling new approaches. Young pilots who would have died in turning fights learned to fight differently. The change was subtle, but Kessler saw it in the loss reports that crossed his desk. The bleeding slowed. Not stopped. The British were still deadly, still determined, still fighting with the desperation of a nation facing invasion. But German pilots were surviving encounters that would have killed them a month earlier. It was not enough. It was never enough. But it was something. Halder noticed the tactical shift. He launched an investigation to find the source of unauthorized communications. Kessler covered his tracks carefully, but he knew it was only a matter of time. The Gestapo had informants everywhere. A single careless word could end everything. On October 12, 1940, Hitler postponed Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. The invasion of Britain was cancelled. Germany had failed to achieve air superiority over the Channel. The Luftwaffe, which had conquered Poland in weeks and France in days, had been fought to a standstill by a few hundred British pilots in their Hurricanes and Spitfires. Kessler received the news in his office at Rechlin. He sat very still for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened and everything that would come next. The war was not over. It would get worse before it ended, he was certain of that. The Eastern Front was coming. Russia. A nightmare that would make the Battle of Britain look like a skirmish, but for now, in this moment, something had been proven. Truth mattered. Reality mattered. The Spitfire was a remarkable aircraft, designed by a dying man who had given his country a fighting chance. And Germany, for all its power and arrogance, had been unable to overcome it. That evening, a second telegram arrived. Kessler opened it with trembling hands, expecting the worst: confirmation of Klaus's death, coordinates for a grave, the formal language of military condolence. Instead, he read, Klaus alive. Captured. POW Camp England. Safe. He sat down heavily, the telegram crumpling in his fist. His brother was alive. A prisoner, yes, but alive. He would survive the war. He would come home. Kessler wept then, alone in his office, with the lights of Rechlin glittering through the window and the sound of aircraft engines echoing across the darkened airfield. He wept for Klaus, for the dead friends he could not save, for the truth that had cost him everything and given him back the only thing that mattered. The war would continue. The killing would continue. But tonight, Werner Kessler allowed himself one moment of grace. His brother was alive. And the truth had not killed him. The snow began falling on Rechlin in early December, covering the hangars and runways in a blanket of white that made the airfield look almost peaceful. Werner Kessler stood at his office window, watching the flakes drift down, and waited for the men who would decide his fate. They came for him at noon, 2 Gestapo officers in black leather coats, accompanied by a pale young lieutenant who could not meet his eyes. The charges were vague but serious: unauthorized contact with frontline units, dissemination of classified information, conduct prejudicial to military morale. In wartime Germany, such charges could mean anything from a reprimand to a firing squad. The interrogation lasted 3 days. They questioned him in a basement room with concrete walls and a single bright light. They showed him copies of letters he had written, transcripts of telephone calls he thought were private. They demanded names of collaborators, details of his network, confessions of treasonous intent. Kessler told them the truth. All of it. The flights in the captured Spitfire. The data he had collected. The report that Halder had suppressed. The information he had passed to frontline pilots because that information was saving German lives. He did not apologize. He did not beg. He simply explained, in the calm voice of a scientist presenting evidence, why he had done what he had done. On the third day, the interrogation stopped. The Gestapo officers left without explanation. Kessler was returned to a holding cell and left alone with his thoughts that he had made peace with death. In the long hours of darkness, he had written letters in his mind, to Klaus, to his parents, to friends who would never receive them. He had reviewed his choices and found them correct. The truth was worth dying for. It always had been. A week later, the cell door opened. But instead of executioners, he found a Luftwaffe general he had never met, a gray-haired man with tired eyes and the Knight's Cross at his throat. The general sat down across from Kessler and studied him for a long moment. "Your report on the Spitfire," the general said quietly. "I read it. The real one, not the propaganda version Halder submitted." You were right about everything. The turning radius. The climb rate. The control response. Everything. Kessler said nothing. He had learned that silence was sometimes the wisest response. There are men in the high command who understand the value of honest assessment, the general continued. Men who know that this war will not be won by lying to ourselves about enemy capabilities. They have intervened on your behalf. And Halder? Oberstleutnant Halder has been reassigned to an administrative position in Norway. His career advancement has been reconsidered. Kessler felt nothing. Revenge had never been his purpose. He had wanted only to tell the truth and save what lives he could. Halder was irrelevant. You will be released, the general said. Your record will show a minor disciplinary action, nothing that will affect your future. You will be reassigned to fighter development at Messerschmitt. We need men who can evaluate enemy aircraft honestly. Men who understand that knowing your enemy is the first step to defeating him. And my brother? The general's expression softened slightly. Klaus Kessler is in a POW camp near London. He is being treated according to the Geneva Convention. He will survive the war. You have my word. The release came 3 days later. Kessler walked out of the detention facility into a world transformed by winter. The snow was knee-deep now, muffling all sound, making the familiar landscape strange and new. He breathed cold air into his lungs and felt, for the first time in months, something like hope. Before leaving Rechlin, he asked permission to visit the hangar where the captured Spitfire was stored. The guards let him pass. The aircraft sat under a thin layer of dust, its elliptical wings still perfect, its Merlin engine cold and silent. It had been photographed, measured, analyzed, and eventually forgotten. The war had moved on. New enemies, new aircraft, new technologies demanded attention. Kessler stood before the Spitfire for a long time. He thought about Flight Lieutenant Ashworth, the British pilot who had been forced down in that French wheat field. Intelligence reports said Ashworth was in a POW camp too, perhaps even the same camp as Klaus. Two enemies who had never met, connected by a machine that had changed both their lives. That he thought about Reginald Mitchell, dying of cancer while he drew the wings that would save his country. He thought about the young British pilots who had climbed into Spitfires day after day, knowing the odds, knowing they might not come home, and climbing in any way. That he raised his hand in a slow salute, not to Germany, not to the Luftwaffe, but to the aircraft itself and everything it represented. Courage. Truth. The refusal to surrender even when surrender seemed reasonable. Then Werner Kessler turned off the hangar lights, walked out into the snow, and began the long journey toward whatever future remained. Behind him, in the darkness, the Spitfire waited. The war would continue for 4 more terrible years. Millions would die. Cities would burn. The world would be remade in fire and blood. But somewhere in that darkness, truth had survived. And sometimes, in the arithmetic of war, that was enough. The snow kept falling. The silence was absolute. And the Spitfire, guardian of a secret that had saved German lives and British honor alike, stood watch over the empty hangar until spring.